So if you're looking at this screen and just listening to my bump music, it's because I'm getting a couple of things ready here. As soon as we're ready, I'm going to have Rick Travis from the California Rifle and Pistol Association with me. We're going to talk about the gun confiscation here in California that DOJ is doing. You may have seen the video for that. We're going to talk about a bunch of other stuff, and we will actually have video for you here in just a couple minutes. Let me get everything set up. In the meantime, take just a minute or two and enjoy the tunes. We'll be back. All right, I think we got everything except one thing, so that's working. Let's do this so you can actually see me. I just realized our studio lights are not on, so I need to take care of that. And then I think we're good to go. There's one. Hang on a second. This is what happens with live streams, isn't it? Hang on. That should be a little bit better, so I'm not sitting in the dark. All right, here we go. And since I run this all by myself because it's GunGuyTV, we're a small operation. It's just us. What can I say? It's my son and I, basically, and that's about it. We don't have a crew or producers or whatever, so it's basically me. I'm going to check real quick before we get Rick on. Let me know if the stream is going and if you can hear it okay. I see a couple of people saying, hello, Gun Guy. Let me get my coffee here. You know me, I had a guy that watches the channel regularly come and qualify with us the other day with Practical Defense Systems for his security guard exposed permit. And I went and got a cup of coffee. He said, you love your coffee. I think he watches the show quite a bit. By the way, before I get Rick on, I want to let you know that I do not make a living on YouTube, just so that you know. I make a living with Practical Defense Systems. That's what the company that my wife and I own, so you can see it there. That's at pdsclasses.com. We train security officers throughout the state. We've got about, I think, not quite 17,000 students at this point. We also do concealed carry courses for California if you happen to be in the San Diego area and you get approved by the Sheriff's Department, which, by the way, he's approving more people. Then we certainly would appreciate your business if you're interested in the security business or you would like a concealed carry permit for sure. Let us know. Now, we're going to get started here with Rick Travis from CRPA. Rick, it's good to see you again. Although last time I saw you, it was actually in person at SHOT Show. Now we get to look at each other through video monitors again.
Good to see you too.
Now, real quick, talk a bit. Let's talk just briefly, but I'm going to turn on the thing here so people can let me know if they can't hear you. Obviously, I'm not techno savvy, so I want to make sure you can hear Rick talk a little bit. Let me know if you can hear him.
Hello, folks, and thank you for being on GunGuyTV.
Okay, if I don't see anybody saying they can't hear you, then I know they can, and we can get started. So looks like everybody's doing their thing, and they can hear you just fine. So here we go. All right, Rick. A bunch of stuff has happened in California, and I know you want to talk about a lot of things I want to hear some good news too. But the hot button at the moment has been the whole thing with the California Department of Justice Firearms group, or whatever you want to call them, and the confiscations that they've been doing. And one in particular in which they took some pistols away, AR pistols away from a guy, I think he was out here in Santee in San Diego County.
Correct.
And that ended up on video because he shot video of it. And I think the video here on GunGuyTV has about 400,000 views and probably that many nasty comments about DOJ agents. So I'm wondering if you have any information as to what's going on there, what DOJ is doing, and what we can expect from them going forward.
Well, it's obvious by what's shown up on the video that you put out and others have been putting out that we have an issue of where DOJ is actually going out to gun owners' homes and asking for them to go ahead and give up their firearms and allow them to be confiscated. And so far that is happening all too frequently. But the issue really at the end of the day for us is, if you look at the app system, which is the system that tracks those people who are criminals who have illegal firearms, DOJ currently has over 23,000 people they know that have firearms illegally, and they're doing nothing to go after them. Yet they're, quote, nonchalantly going around to people like you had in your video and saying, hey, we need your firearms. And the question I think all of us should be asking is, every time one of these new bills, which we're going to talk about several of them later on in this show, comes up, what the politicians say is, hey, this is for safety. And I have seriously questions about safety, and that's more about confiscation when you're going to law-abiding citizens' homes and trying to find some technicality to confiscate a firearm instead of going after the 23,000 known felons that have firearms illegally.
By the way, I just realized that you've had my name in front of you this whole time, so let me fix that so that you actually look like you. This is what happens when it's a low-budget show. All right, here we go. There's Rick. That's Rick Travis from the California Rifle and Pistol Association. This would actually be me. So now that we have that kind of squared away, excuse the faux pas. Yeah, that's one of the problems, Rick, and that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm hearing from people is not only are these agents not being allowed, it sounds like, to go out and chase real criminals, it sounds like there's a little bit of a rebellion going on within that department of DOJ, where there's a group of agents that simply don't want to be out doing this. They'd rather be chasing real criminals. But the other problem that I see is there doesn't appear to be any due process involved here. They show up, they do a knock and talk on the door, they take your gun, they leave. Is there a process for people to actually go through some established due process to make sure that their guns aren't confiscated or to fight to get the guns back? I mean, how does that work? Is there anything that they can do?
Well, there's several issues here. One is making sure that the people document everything, and that's hard because, in the case where the person had the camera on that was able to videotape, we have excellent documentation of law enforcement's responses to answers to the questions. There's zero hearsay because it's all documented. What unfortunately happens is most people are caught completely off guard, have no documentation, becomes a he said, she said incident. They take a while to call a lawyer and get the law involved, which is what we need to do. But it's also all of us saying, why is this happening to the law-abiding citizen? And again, DOJ is a small department, doesn't have a lot of resources. We already know currently within the status quo that once we brought on the long gun registration, DOJ has become incredibly slow, incredibly inefficient. With the ammunition regs coming in on July 1st, that's going to slow the process even more. And I think it was less than a dozen people off of that app system, which again are the criminals with firearms, were actually attempted or apprehended in the last fiscal year. So looking at, with, like I said, over 23,000 known criminals in the state running around with illegal firearms, I find it striking that the focus is on those with possible technicalities.
One of the things that I'm discovering, I think, and this has been the aftermath, if you want to call it that, or the result of the video being posted, is I've heard from agents in that department, and I can't and I won't name them because obviously. I say that, I won't name them, and people say, you're protecting law enforcement. Well, yes, I am, I guess, but I'm also protecting a source where somebody can tell us what's going on there, and if I name them, then they get in deep trouble, and they won't talk to me anymore. So that's kind of how that works. So I won't name them, but, pardon me?
I want to say something on that. Yeah. That is one of the issues I think that impacts all of us, Joel, whether it's you, we're using GunGuyTV, us at the CRPA, NRA, and other 2A groups throughout the state. All of us have something in common. We have people at DOJ, we have people at ATF and other places who are trying to be good people and feed us to information. But we can't name them because if we do, we lose all that information forever. And so I can't. I mean, and people get mad because you can't or they think you're lying. Look, here's the thing. Right. I've heard from some of these agents who are actually on that team, and I've verified it. So it's not just people who. Now, I should say at the same time, I've heard a ton of people who sent me. I don't know how many emails I've gotten where people have sent us emails and said, "Hey, this happened to me. Let me tell you my story, and I want to come on the show and tell my story." I've probably got dozens of those, but the problem is I can't verify any of those, so that's why I haven't passed them on. And I want to say I'm sure that 80 or 90% of those are telling me the truth, but since I can't verify it, I don't want to pass that information out. Where I've been able to verify the information I've gotten from these agents to the degree that I can, and what I've discovered is that even in the case of the gentleman whose AR pistols were taken, I will share with you what was told to me by a couple of agents there, that the agent who did the talking in that video quote unquote drew the short straw because he didn't want to do it, but it was his case, so he had to do it. So they went and they took the gun, and all of them, the guy says to them, this is wrong, right? Well, let me tell you something. Yes, they know it's wrong. They ended up doing it anyway. They had a huge meeting, apparently, on this case before they went that got to the point of right on the ragged, one of the quotes one of the agents told me is it got right on the ragged edge of insubordination.
when they were finally told, and this is the quote I was told, they were told, go out and do your job or work at 7-Eleven. Now, they were told to go out, confiscate the guns, and arrest the guy.
Mm-hmm.
They took the guns. They refused to arrest the guy. They also had another one where they confiscated a rifle, apparently from a Navy SEAL, and they were challenged because they didn't arrest this active duty Navy SEAL.
Wow.
Now, this is a guy who, again, he tried to register his rifle. He made a procedural mistake, and they went and took the rifle. He gave him the rifle. He didn't fight with him or argue with him or whatever. He just told him, he said, guys, this is not right. And they said, no, yeah, well, it is. It's the law, and we have to enforce it. And they took the rifle. They got barked at and criticized for not arresting an active duty Navy SEAL for a felony for making a procedural mistake. That's a career ender for him. If they arrest him for that, that could potentially end his naval career. Of course, they're not going to arrest him for that, but they didn't. There was another case where a gentleman who was in his 80s who tried to register a rifle that had been illegal for a long time under the Roberti Rus or whatever you call it, old law, but he didn't know that. Right. So when this came up, he tried to register it, not realizing it was already illegal. Well, when they went to confiscate it, he gave it to them. He didn't fight them about it. And I was told afterwards that the agents were again criticized strongly because they didn't arrest this 80-some-odd-year-old man for having made a procedural mistake. So it sounds like there's the agents are doing what they have to do in order to keep their jobs, but refusing to make these arrests where it's destroying an honest, law-abiding person's life. They're losing their property, which is bad enough, but it doesn't wipe out their life at the same time. And I find that to be, maybe I'm talking too much here, but I find that to be absolutely unconscionable. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
No, my thoughts are we've had a couple of cases, like you said, we can't verify all the matters because we weren't there and it's hard to do that. But we've had a couple examples. One that's notable to me is we had a lady who she's a widow of a military officer that passed away. And same thing, they had moved in the state just before he retired and didn't realize there were some firearms that they weren't supposed to have because of California's laws. They were perfectly acceptable from the state that they had previously been stationed at. And when the agents came to collect them, because somehow the word got out, the agent did not arrest her, looked at her. I believe she was in her late 70s, early 80s. And I think was moving on the concept more about, the spirit of the law than the actual, like, hey, this is an arrest that I can make, and preserved her good name and everything else. But again, other agents and other people were like, hey, she should have been arrested. She should go do her time. And this is what's happening. The law-abiding citizen, which was my point earlier, is being focused on myopically, I would argue, when we have over 23,000 people that are known offenders, are known criminals. They've committed heinous acts to prevent them from having firearms. The DOJ knows, and they're not sending the agents out against them.
No, they're sending them out to go visit these law-abiding folks. That's what they're sending them out to go get. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous at some point. Look, there's one of the things that really gripes me about this, beyond what we've already talked about, is the fact that these are all procedure crimes. When they're going after the law-abiding citizens, they're going after them because they made some small mistake in trying to register a firearm, which means arguably, whether you agree with the registration or law or not, which if you're watching this, I can tell you that neither Rick nor I agree with the registration law. In fact, we fight it mightily, and Rick does on a constant basis. But nevertheless, whether you agree with it or not, these folks are trying then to obey the law. And because they made some small mistake in the procedure of attempting to obey the law, it becomes a felony, and the politicians in Sacramento and the management at the Department of Justice wants these folks arrested and prosecuted for felonies because they did some little procedural mistake. One of the agents I spoke to from the DOJ from this team said, this is what he said to me. He said, what we'd like to do as agents is if somebody sends us a picture of a gun and it's not right, they're trying to register, we want to send them back a letter that says, okay, here's on this picture, you've got this on this firearm, and that makes the gun illegal. So you need to change that and then send us new pictures. And you got whatever, X period of time to do that. That's some due process. He even said to me, he said, why can't we, as the Department of Justice, if we have to enforce these wacky laws, why can't we say to citizens, if you're not sure that your gun is legal and you're concerned about that, bring it down to your local DOJ office. We'll look at it. We'll tell you what needs to change. And then you go home and change it. Bring it back. We'll look at it again.
Well, that's what you'd be doing if you were trying to correct the issue. But that's not the point in this. And, one of the things I'll bring up is there's been several people who have called our offices and told us a story. And I'm sure you've heard the same thing, where they legally and lawfully tried to register their firearms, like in the case of the AR pistols and others. They sent it in way before the schedule. We're kind of given a tacit, yeah, you look good. And then later on, DOJ changed their mind and went, no, that's not good. And they didn't give them a chance to make it right or to make whatever change DOJ. They just sent out the group to come, confiscate the firearms. And that's why more and more, many of us are saying this isn't about doing what's right. It's about finding loopholes to do firearms confiscation.
Well, I think it goes farther than that, too. It's not just firearms confiscation, which is bad enough.
Right.
It's the fact that now this should not be happening in the United States.
Right.
No law-abiding United States citizen should live in consistent, constant fear of their government. That's something that happens in banana republics. That's something that happens in dictatorships and totalitarian countries. It should not happen in the United States that any law-abiding American in any state, I don't care if it's California or Arizona or Wisconsin or New York, nobody should have to live, if they're law-abiding people, in constant fear that DOJ or some other law enforcement agency is going to show up at their door, knock on their door, confiscate their stuff, and take them to jail. And yet that is what's happening with gun owners in the state of California. And I find it completely appalling. I guess my question now is, what, if anything, can we do about this?
Well, there's several things. I mean, in the most basic, and I've said before on your show, you've said it, but I almost feel like we're talking to empty people that don't want to listen, but it's voting. Many of these politicians that are fronting up this barely got into those positions that they're currently in. The Democrats didn't landslide into the supermajority. Some of the freshmen barely won by less than 1 to 2 percentage points. That is an easy flippable seat. But when we can't get our own people to go out and vote because they use the excuse they'll go elsewhere, and we're seeing in this current political season that going elsewhere does nothing because California's heinous restrictions on gun rights are spreading across the nation, ironically, with the Californians that leave and go to those places.
Well, I think it's Sam Paredes who regularly says that California either affects or infects the rest of the nation, and he's right. So as he's, the problem with moving, and look, would I love to be able to just pack up and move to Prescott Valley, Arizona, and hunt whenever I want to and do whatever I want? Sure. But the only problem is that Californians who vote this kind of garbage in, not just the gun laws, Rick, but also they vote in the crazy taxes and the lunacy of the way that we run our schools in this state and all this nonsense. I mean, we've got college campus boards wanting to disarm the college cops, which is just nuts. We have all this kind of crazy stuff. Then they don't like it. They don't like the fact that now it's expensive to live here and that everything is incredibly costly and all these taxes are piling up and all this stuff that they voted in. They move to another state where the cost of living is less and the freedom is much more, and then they vote in precisely the same kind of garbage they left. This is what we're seeing happen right now in Texas and Colorado, Washington, Oregon. Need I go on and list them all? So at some point, if you're a gun owner and you don't like any of this stuff and you move to Texas, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, or some other state, which at this moment, now Washington and Oregon and not so much, but Texas, some parts of Texas are turning totally blue. You move to one of these other states, look at what's happening in Nevada right now. You have to understand this stuff is going to follow you wherever you go. All you've done is give yourself a temporary reprieve from it. You haven't escaped it. And so staying and fighting, to me, for me, and for my family, makes more sense.
Well, and you got to realize our own governor, who is heading up a lot of this, and we're going to discuss that, he has plans to go become the president of the United States and has openly said that. So, we're even exporting, trying to, as a state to the national level, this same type of lunacy. And we've got to stop it with the power of the vote.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. Rick, since we're on this subject, I'm going to leave you on screen there. Let me scan through some of these comments and see if anybody's posted a comment that they might have a question for you. If not, then we'll just move on. But let me scan through them real quick. I know I'm leaving you up there. Just don't pretend you're snoozing or pick your nose or something, because you're on screen and everybody will laugh at you. That's why I'm not up there, in case I'm doing something stupid. But let me look and see. I'm not seeing anything that looks like a question. Lots of statements. Somebody liking the Bass Pro coffee cup. Yes, I do get my coffee cups at Bass Pro. That's my favorite store. I get in there, I can't get out. I do love to hunt. Let's see. Here you go. Have you heard? Have you heard that there is a new bill apparently to stop sheriffs from not following unconstitutional laws? I haven't heard of that. Have you heard of that?
We haven't seen that yet.
Okay.
There are a lot of bills that are being talked about, but one of the things that people need to realize, we're at a point in the legislative season that all the bills that had to be out are currently out, with the one exception that California is known for, and it probably won't happen until sometime late September, early October, and that would be the classic gut and amend that we saw in Gunmageddon. There are some bills that we're watching that could be morphed into something like that, but there's not an official bill like that at this point. Okay,
so I want you to help people understand what the gut and amend thing is. First of all, I think if it isn't unconstitutional, it should be. But I'd be willing to bet you that probably the vast majority of Californians or folks watching from other states have no idea what it means when you say that. And I guarantee you, if it's happening in California, it's going to come to a zip code near you in other states at some point if you see more of these kind of liberal anti-gunners take over the state. So can you explain gut and amend and what they're doing?
Yeah, gun amends came to California in 2016, and what it was prior to that was the concept, and I'm just going to use a simplistic type of bill that could have been a gun and amend. You and I petition our local assemblyman and say, hey, we need a stoplight because there's little kids that are being ran over near this school. And instead, the assemblyman says, no, but I can get a stop sign. So he puts the stop sign, and that becomes an assembly bill. And all of a sudden, in October, something happens in the state budget, there's a report, et cetera, and they're like, oh, we don't want to run another bill now to actually put a traffic light, which is needed. And they would go in and they would tune that bill up, which was called gutting and amending it, in order to allow the stop sign to become a stop signal or a traffic signal in this case. What it was not intended for, and what happened in 2016, is when, at that time, Lieutenant Governor Newsom decided that he wanted to put forward what became known as Proposition 63. We ended up with Kevin De Leon, who was the Senate Pro Tem at that point, and several other members of the Assembly and Senate, taking several different bills, some that were water bills, some that were bills for clean air and other items, and completely gutting them, and then rewriting them very quickly in a day, basically, to be the anti-Gunmageddon bills that were passed through in less than about 48 hours and signed into office by the governor as an attempt to stop Gavin Newsom for having his day. Unfortunately for us, we got both those bills from the gun and amend process, as well as the voter believing that it was safety for all and not reading the fine print and passing Prop 63 on us as well.
Well, one of the, and thank you for that. One of the comments I was reading while I was listening to you ask kind of I think it was a rhetorical question, but one way or the other, I think it's one that's worth mentioning. In the video of the confiscation with the men with the 2 AR pistols, he brought up, there is something in the Constitution called the Second Amendment, because he said, well, we're supposed to enforce the law. He said, yeah, well, the U.S. Constitution. And the cop says, well, there's the California Constitution, too. And I guess that might be worth a little explanation as to at what point does a state's Constitution override that of the United States Constitution, or does it?
It doesn't, but that doesn't stop our Attorney General from having the most lawsuits against the White House and the federal government because he doesn't like what the Constitution has to say. It doesn't fit with their agenda. And then they do that, and the process is the National Rifle Association, the California Rifle Association. You can look to Sam Paredes and Gun Owners of California and other groups fight back for all of us in the 2A community. We launch lawsuits. We often get stays, but that whole process from the very beginning all the way up to the Supreme Court, which thankfully we have a Supreme Court that's favorable to us, can take months, if not years.
Okay, now this is gonna sound like I'm a shill here, and I don't want to sound like a shill, but I'm seeing it. I see it a lot in comments, and so I'm seeing it now. I think it's worth something. It's something that we probably should address, and you're in a unique position to do that, being with the California Rifle and Pistol Association, which is the California affiliate of the National Rifle Association. By the way, in case you're watching, I am a life member of CRPA. I'm also a life member. Open disclosure here. I'm also a life member of the National Rifle Association. I'm a member of Gun Owners of California, and this year, probably before June, I intend to be a life member of Gun Owners of America. I'm already a life member of the Second Amendment Foundation. I support these various organizations because no one does everything well. Some of them do some things extremely well, and others do other things extremely well, and when they work together, they have some great success. But nevertheless, with Bloomberg and Soros and some other people who have big wallets going after the National Rifle Association, what I see a lot is people bagging on NRA, particularly where California is concerned. So I want to give you an opportunity, Rick, to explain whether NRA is actually doing anything to help California, and if so, to what degree, and how committed are they to helping Californians get their Second Amendment rights back?
Well, it's very sad what's happening within our community, because there's a lot of people that have, for whatever reasons, decide to try to do infighting inside the house instead of trying to look, as you said, to what all of these different organizations' strengths and weaknesses are. And to specifically your question on the National Rifle Association, all the money NRA has been raising in California comes back to California. Both NRA ILAs, Chris Cox, as well as Wayne LaPierre, the National Rifle Association, made those promises, have delivered on those promises. But something that, I don't think the average gun owner in this state realizes is prosecuting a lawsuit up against the likes of Soros, Bloomberg, and others goes into the millions of dollars. This isn't something that you settle in small claims court. That process to get it to the Supreme Court where it can become law of the land is very costly, very strategic, and takes time. Then what they do is the NRA also works with other groups throughout the state in partnership, because the NRA very clearly knows that sometimes if they walk in the room, immediately the other side just shuts down. So there are places where the CRPA, Gun Owners of California, the Second Amendment Foundation, as well as hunting groups and other groups take point, because we're all working together for all of you. And so no one group can do it all, but we all are coordinated. And the National Rifle Association supports all of us in various different ways on various topics, because they understand what you said at the very beginning, that this takes all of us and takes using our strengths.
Well, I actually got a call from a gentleman today from New York. Spoke with him for quite a while, and that's one of the things he said is what he would like to see is the various organizations working more together. And I said, they are.
Right.
And he said, no, they're not. So I think there's this public perception that all these organizations are at each other's throats all the time, and they don't really coordinate together and work together. But when you start looking at the court cases, you see an amicus brief comes from this organization and one comes from this organization, and these three organizations are contributing to the lawsuit at the same time, and you get that kind of stuff. And so you start to really see the fact that the organizations do work together very well. And when they do that, because there are strengths and weaknesses, they work together well. My big concern is I don't want to look, I'm sure I'm going to make somebody mad with this statement, but the truth is, whether you like the National Rifle Association or not, they're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And if you kill the NRA, in my humble opinion, you've killed the Second Amendment, because they're the biggest of the bunch, or the strongest of the bunch. We cannot allow anti-gunners in New York or wherever to effectively murder the National Rifle Association. If we jump on the bandwagon, in my humble opinion, we're making a serious error.
Well, and I want to point out something. I met for a little bit with Wayne LaPierre back at SHOT Show when I was talking with you, Joel. And one of the things that people really don't understand is the socialist left is infuriated, because Donald Trump would not be the president of the United States. We would not have not one, but two Supreme Court justices that are favorable to the Second Amendment, had the NRA not emptied its coffers and its resources to make that happen. We owe an incredible debt to the National Rifle Association. Not one other gun organization in the state of California had the money behind them to make that heavy lift. So that is why the rest of us here in California, and Sam Press and I work all the time, are trying to make sure the ground game here in California is being covered by our organizations with the support of the NRA, because their fight is making sure that Supreme Court stays pro Second Amendment. If we lose that in this next election, the culture of what we know today will be completely wiped off the face of the earth.
Well, I tell you, I remember, and then I have some questions people have posted. So it's just a comment. When you and I got together in the press room at SHOT Show, you immediately had to leave because your executive assistant is grabbing you and checking you out of the room because you were going to a meeting with Sam Paredes from Gun Owners of California and with the other state advocate groups, not just NRA affiliated, but the other state advocate groups, to talk about how you can coordinate and how you can work together and what's going on in the individual states. With that in mind, there's one comment here from Ian Moon. Ian, if I've messed that up, forgive me. He says, Illinois has proposed a bill to prevent sheriffs from not following the constitutional law as well. You're going to start seeing that stuff happening across the country. It's not just California. Also, let's see, Hawaii. He also posted this. Hawaii wants to call for the Convention of the States to repeal the Second Amendment. Now, I would say good luck with that because I don't think that's got a chance of a fart in a whirlwind of happening. But I don't know. You have any comments on that?
Yeah, so I'm going to handle those a little separately. So the first one, if you could repeat that real again, because I was writing some notes on the repealing.
I can. He posted that. Let me go find it again. I'm sorry, I scrolled down there. He posted that Illinois has proposed a bill to prevent sheriffs from not following unconstitutional gun laws. So in other words, the sheriffs are saying, no way, Jose, I'm not going to enforce that. And Illinois wants to pass a bill to force them to enforce it.
So let's talk about the sheriffs first. I, along with the rest of our organization, I'll just take CRPA alone. We took a bashing statewide, and you and I talked about this back in 2018 during the election, because we didn't get involved in some of the local races for Assembly and Senate because we had to look at our funding. But one of the places we got very strategically involved throughout the state, with the exception of a couple of counties where both sheriff's candidates were clearly for the Second Amendment. There could be arguments made one side or the other. But on areas where there wasn't, we fought very, very hard. And I will tell you a result of that fight. We just got done for the first time in California's history of getting the majority of the 58 sheriffs. We got 48 of them together for a conference to look at how to get CCWs into the hands of more California law-abiding citizens. That was historic. That has never been done. These are the constitutional officers in this state to have to see if the laws coming out of this supermajority or on either side of the aisle are ever constitutional. And hearing those sheriffs, hearing their officers at the top, these are the people that are going to make those decisions, and many of them may be the sheriffs in the next decade. They were unified on the Second Amendment and defending the Second Amendment, which feeds me to the repealing of the Second Amendment. I think it's important that all of us remember something. The founding fathers could put all those first 10 amendments known as our Bill of Rights in any order they chose. But they chose the First Amendment, and then they put the Second Amendment, and I call that the bookend, because it's after the Second Amendment that the words shall not be infringed come. If you look across our globe, Joel, and you know this, we've talked about this, the only countries that have the rights of the First Amendment that are guaranteed and still standing in some level, and I know many of our listeners would say, well, some of those are already being watered down. I'm not going to argue that point. But at least they still have legs under them, is because you have the Second Amendment to defend it. If we lose the Second Amendment, if we allow that, we don't just lose our gun rights. We lose our rights to redress government, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. That whole part of the First Amendment, all those rights encompassing, I only mentioned a few of them, are lost forever.
Well, and I'll tell you one more thing. We have other amendments. So, for example, and then we probably should move on to some other things. I want to talk about the constitutional carry movement and where it's going and some stuff like that. But with regard to these DOJ seizures, I'm just going to make you aware, if you're watching this, that the overwhelming majority of the time, they don't have a warrant. They call it a knock and talk. They knock on the door, and if you're stupid enough to talk to them, they'll talk you into letting you in the house. If you see them outside the door, don't answer the door. If you happen to answer the door, and there they are, say, have a nice night, officers, and close the door. You're not required to let them in your house. You're not required to speak to them unless they have a warrant. If they have a legal warrant, then yeah, you have to let them in the house. But otherwise, then you don't. I actually ran into a guy at the range a couple of days ago, I was teaching. I had a whole bunch of students, and afterwards I was sitting there doing some paperwork, and he asked me about this. He said, before I watched your video, I thought I had to let them in the house. I thought I had to talk to them. No, you don't. You have the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees you the right against unlawful search and seizure. You have the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, which guarantees your right to remain silent, your right against self-incrimination. So here I want to encourage you, where law enforcement is concerned, take the time, if you haven't already done it, and educate yourself with regard to the following amendments. The Second Amendment, which you already know, but look up the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment, and look up those three and read them. They're pretty much in plain language, and those are the ones that limit what law enforcement can do, and then you understand what you can do, because the overwhelming majority of the time when they do a knock and talk, they have no legal means to search you or your home unless you let them.
And I would add, you need to be able to teach your family members and friends about that, because unfortunately, our educational system has failed Americans to tell them what their rights are.
Right. Well, they don't anymore. When I was a kid and when you were a kid, Rick, we learned that stuff. All right, let's move on now. There's some positive stuff going on. I'm absolutely over the moon about the fact that it seems like on a regular basis, another state becomes constitutional carry. It just happened again the other day. What's going on with that?
Well, I think this is part of the pushback that's happened in states that still have a fighting chance because their people vote. And so they're getting these constitutional carry movements. Again, my hat goes off to the National Rifle Association, Second Amendment Foundation, others who on a nationwide basis are pushing this. And we need to keep pushing it, as well as the local groups in those states that also support those. And so it's not a one-off group that's doing it. It's a collective effort. But I say this all the time. A lot of people say California is a foregone conclusion. When you look at some of the states that have passed these constitutional carry movements, they were places that a lot of California gun owners wouldn't have thought about going to that have done that. And there's some others that are pushing back, not just in this area, but also in hunting rights and passing that, as a citizen of their state, you have a right to fish, a right to hunt, a right to self-protection, a right to carry. So there's a lot of America that is pushing back for what they see as their constitutional rights, and God bless them.
Absolutely. By the way, I want to say a quick thank you real quick to some folks who are doing super chats, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I certainly don't expect people to do that, but I got to tell you, the money that comes in from that, we put right back into GunGuyTV, because as I said at the outset, I don't do this for a living. So anything that comes into GunGuyTV, it does make a little bit of money every month, goes right back into it. That's how we can afford the cameras and the lighting. And like right now, I'm using Wirecast Pro, which is a pricey piece of software to do this Wirecast, make it look nice for you and sound good for you. And this is stuff that we invest money in on a regular basis. So any money that comes in, we put right back into GunGuyTV again. Likewise, we've, in case you don't know, Rick's going to be on it here pretty soon. Been on it once before. We do have the GunGuyTV audio podcast, which is syndicated on iTunes, which is now Apple Podcast and all the other podcast places. And we're pushing it out to internet radio as well. So we've made an application with iHeartRadio and some other places to get that out there. And right now, if you go to the GunGuyTV website at gunguy.tv, you can click on the little app at the top and you can listen to that radio station, and it takes the previous 3 podcasts and just rotates them for you. So you can do that if you want to. That's one of the many ways we're trying to get the content out. So if you're doing super chats, I want to thank you very much for that. What's going on? I keep hearing rumors. Rick, what's going on with California? What's coming up with the semi-auto stuff? It sounds to me like I'm going to just lay my $50 down here right now and say that I'm of the opinion that the California legislature and Gavin Newsom, our brand new troublemaker in the governor's seat, would love to ban all guns, but most especially right now, semi-autos. What's happening?
Well, so far, as I said earlier, we have some bills that we're watching because it could very easily be twisted into that. But as far as what's above the line legally that had to come out in the last part of February, basically the things that we're seeing is the infamous, you can only buy one long rifle, which would affect what we normally see as the semi-automatic firearms, because we're usually talking about the rifle version, not the pistol version, would limit it to one a month. And so that is definitely in play. And if I was to place my $50, I would say Gavin Newsom will wholeheartedly sign down the law with the supermajority delivering it to him. But we are pushing back. We're fighting on that. as long as with some other ones. It seems right now their attack is culturally based. And when we get to that point, I can explain what that means, because we have some tag team bills that are hitting several areas that affect us in the Second Amendment. And I will also say that, we're looking at not just the bills that are currently on, but with the ones we're monitoring close to 40 bills right now.
40? Wait a minute. Did you say 40 bills? 40?
Yeah,
oh
40.
My gosh. Okay, well, we'll get to those here in just a couple of minutes, but it doesn't sound...
I wasn't joking when I said we could do like 5 hours of this show just covering the legislature.
It's giving me a headache just thinking about 40 bills. Oh, my gosh. Okay, well, one guy did make a statement in here. He said, let me go see if I can find it again. He said, get rid of the handgun roster and then we'll support NRA. Okay, well, what you don't realize is that battle is in court.
Correct.
They're working on it. Here's the problem that you got. Okay, and this is just to make sure that you understand.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, you can. In just a second, they can pass laws as fast as they want. The problem is dragging them through the court system takes years, and they're in the court system. But it's not a microwave proposition. It costs a lot of money and takes a long time. Whereas the legislature, because they have a supermajority and Gavin Newsom will sign whatever is sent them, they can pass laws as fast as they want, whether they're constitutional or not. Anyway, go ahead, Rick.
I may offend your viewer, and I don't mean that. I mean, number one, I understand the frustration that he is talking about. I'm equally as frustrated. And that's not just me blowing smoke. I am. I'm a firearms owner. My family has had a long tradition. We were in this country before it was even the United States, and have worked with firearms, since the dawn of us arriving here in the 1600s. But my point at the end of the day is this. When we choose, because we're upset because a heinous thing like the roster comes up, to say, you know what, that doesn't. I'm not going to support the NRA while they go to court to fight for me. I'm not going to support Gun Owners of California or the California Rifle Pistol Association because, it's their fault. Number one, let's go back. Those people wouldn't be in office that passed those bills had gun owners stood unified together and were indivisible instead of being invisible. And that is something that you're going to hear me say a lot this year. We can no longer afford, and I've been saying for a while, to be invisible, to be these silent people that stand back and never come out and speak our mind and vote. We need to be indivisible, standing side by side. And when you choose to hold your money back because you're upset, and I get why you're upset, in a sense, you're aiding and abetting Soros and Bloomberg because you're allowing their money to become even more powerful and more effective in this fight.
Well, you probably did offend anybody or somebody, and that's okay. Why not?
Wouldn't be the first time.
It won't be the first time, won't be the last, and that's okay. You're telling the truth, and that's extremely important. All right, and I agree with you, quite frankly. Okay, what new? All right, here we go. Here it is. What new gun bills are we facing in the state of California?
Okay, so I'm going to try to limit to 4 areas because I know we have a limit on time. So what we're seeing this year in the legislature is you're seeing partnerships. So we'll start off with 2 assemblymen, both Ting and Irwin, who are trying to go after the gun violence restraining orders. And this is what's interesting. You have, first off, Irwin wants to see the gun violence restraining order extended to a 5-year period of time. So if you got served one, it's 5 years. The impact on that is not just that you can't, have a firearm for 5 years, but the fact is you're not going to be able to store those with the FFL for 5 years. So in effect, whatever collection of firearms you've had are gone. Now, that's not enough because his buddy Ting, right across the aisle from him, still in the same party, has now put a deal that, imagine this, what it basically says is that any employee, co-worker, or an employee of a second or post-secondary school that a person has attended within the last 6 months has the right to say, Jack's crazy and Jack shouldn't have firearms, and there's a gun violence restraining order. So that means it could be a girlfriend, a boyfriend, somebody you did better than a test on. You don't even have to be taking classes for a degree. Maybe you went to a community college to learn how to be a better cook or how to, build a bookshelf at home, and somebody doesn't like you. Anybody in that situation could say, I think they're a bad person. You should remove their firearms. So if these two bills go through, it uses that gun violence restraining order that we're already litigating and makes it even bigger. And that's something I'm going to talk about too, is as we start to unroll these, you got to realize a lot of these are already being litigated as unconstitutional. And the legislature does not care that the state is already being sued on its actions. They're now bringing legislation to say, you know what, we're going to thumb our nose at the Supreme Court and we're going for it anyways.
Wow. Wow. Well, before we go any further, let me remind you that this is not something I do for a living, so we need your support in order to keep GunGuyTV alive. One way you can do that is by supporting us by using Amazon when you shop Amazon and using our Amazon link. Amazon is not the most gun-friendly place in the world, that's for certain, but frankly, if you want to pick their pocket and help out GunGuyTV a little bit, we certainly wouldn't mind that. It costs you absolutely nothing. All you have to do is use our Amazon link. You'll find it on our website at GunGuy.tv. You'll also find it in the description of this live stream, which will be it'll be saved by YouTube, and then it'll also be distributed in all of the other places we send them, which is among other places Vimeo, Facebook, and so on. So keep an eye out for it there, and please help us out by using our Amazon link. All right, now we're getting back to this. I wrote this on this piece of paper, by the way, in really big letters. I printed and I sent it to you. So it's there. Please. Give me some good news. Please give me some. Is there any good news on the horizon?
Yeah, there's some good news, but there was two other sections of bills I really want to make sure your people know about.
I thought you were done. I was hoping you were done. Okay, yeah, go ahead. No problem.
Okay, so the next two is, as everybody should know on your program, we have a fight to ruin the culture of gun ownership in California. And that is part of Gavin Newsom's plan, as well as his leftist socialists are working with them. And those can be seen down your area in San Diego at the Del Mar Fairgrounds of trying to remove the gun show and gain that stay, which the California Rifle Pistol Association, NRA, GOC, and others have actively been fighting against. We have a lawsuit against that. And it's also happening at the Cow Palace up in the Bay Area. And what's happened now is Gloria, the assembly person from down your neck of the woods, has a bill called AB 893 that's designed to make it permanently illegal to have a gun show at Del Mar. And Wiener is doing the same thing with Senate Bill 281. And we need people calling in by the droves, opposing this, and trying to get every assembly person they know to vote against these. Because if these go through, it's not just the fact we're going to lose gun shows and gun safety, and for people to be able to find out about defense programs such as you teach, but it's also allowing big government to say, you know what? We don't like that you're a hairdresser, so no more hairdressing conventions at the fairgrounds. We don't like that you're a dog owner, because we like cats better, so no more dog shows at these fairgrounds. It's allowing the legislature to now outlaw anyone's pursuit because they just find it distasteful or they just dislike it.
All right, Rick, there's a couple of comments here. One, just somebody popped up here. Stop blaming the Democrats. The Republicans are just as much a part of the problem, if not more so. Any comments?
I'm not blaming just the Democrats. I was very careful what I said. When I said leftist socialists, we have some Democrats that we work with inside the Capitol building. They have done a great job. The CRPA has actually honored several of them as outstanding legislators and will continue to do that. But right now, it is those who are way to the left, that are crazy to the left, that are doing it.
Well, I tend to agree. All right, a couple more here. Let me see if I can grab them here for you real quick. And I scrolled down like a dummy and I lost them, so stick with me for just a minute here. I'm trying to get your questions and the comments that kind of are framed as a question sort of in there if I can. So please just hang in there. One gentleman said, support all Second Amendment groups. I agree. That's one of the things I'm actively doing. One individual asked here, it's a comment here. Here in New Jersey, we have that same law, one pistol per month or one handgun per month. And again, I don't know whether it started in New Jersey or California, but one way or the other, it's awful. All right, here's the other one. Big question mark about these things. Has Gun Owners of America gotten involved?
I haven't followed everything to Gun Owners of America. I know they do a lot of things. I know they work on a national level. I don't know what they've done in California other than what Sam Perez and Gun Owners of California have done.
Well, and that's something that we probably should cover here, and because I talk to Sam a lot, and I know that
Very good
different
friend.
organization, very good guy, and a personal friend. I love him.
Right.
Here's the deal with gun owners. My understanding about Gun Owners of America is that Gun Owners of America covers all of the states. The way they're organized, they cover all of the states except California, because California, it's my understanding, is the only state that has its own Gun Owners of America affiliate, and that affiliate is Gun Owners of California, run by Sam and Lori Paredes, who are arguably awesome.
Yes.
So California is unique in that because it's a problem child. It has its own Gun Owners of America affiliate, which is Gun Owners of California. So different organizations. Gun Owners of America, by contrast, covers all other 49 states. So that's kind of how that works. So the answer to your question is technically no. Gun Owners of America is not active in California, but Gun Owners of California is, and now perhaps that explains why.
And maybe
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe this is a good point too to explain the differences between the CRPA and the NRA. We're not the California NRA. We are our own organization, but back in 1875, we became one of the first state affiliates, which means we're responsible for all the state championships that lead to like the nationals at Camp Perry. And that's what it means to be the state affiliate. We generally don't disagree with them on legislation and things like that. We work together, which is obviously, as you said throughout the show, in the lawsuits and everything. But we are two separate organizations.
Now, just out of curiosity, if somebody donates money to NRA and they're in California, where does that money go?
That money usually goes straight to lawsuits here in California.
So is there a difference between the National Rifle Association and the NRA Institute for Legislative Action?
No, they're connected, but most of the money that's raised in California is usually done through Friends of NRA.
I see.
Or
Okay.
It's done through the NRA ILA or sometimes NRA Direct. And so if it's done through Friends of NRA, that is the money that goes back to regional things such as Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and different things that happen throughout the state of California.
Right.
And then when it's ILA, that money goes directly into legislation, and the money that goes back to NRA headquarters also goes into litigation.
Now, do you have more lawsuits that you want to talk about at this point? I know you have more lawsuits to talk about. You're talking about.
As fast as they're coming out with bills, we're coming out with lawsuits to stop them. But you said you want some good news. And
I do. If you're ready to give me good news, then please do. I'm sorry. Here's one more. Somebody wants me to have Jared from Guns and Gadgets on the next show. I'm just so you know, I'm certainly open to doing that. I've never talked to him, so I don't know him. I've never contacted him, and I don't know the guy. So, but I'm certainly open to having him on the show. Absolutely, that's not a problem. I have watched his channels. It's good. I like it. So yeah, I mean, if he is available to do it and wants to do it, that would be peachy fine. Let me see if there's another one here. I'm not finding any. So go ahead. You said you were going to give me some good news, and Lord knows I don't want to delay that. Go ahead.
So there is some good news. When it comes to the youth in the state of California, obviously there's been a lot of things done to hurt the culture of youth getting involved in shooting, whether it's the ammo restrictions or it's the 1 month for the firearms. Because if you look at like a unit of youth, you have to be able to purchase several firearms, and if you can only purchase one, that delays the program. But some things that are really exciting is up in Northern California, a couple of the different counties, it's spreading, but they actually have a league for rodeo cowboy shooting. So we have high schoolers that are practicing, they have teams, and they go out and compete. And that looks like it's picking up and may start to come down here to Southern California as well. So that's kind of fun and unique, and it's a new way to get people out. We also have a major event happening out in Corona, which is slightly north of you, at a place called Rojagas on April 13th, which is called the Crawfish Boil. We're trying to put events on this throughout the state, and these events are designed to bring your friends, family members, people that aren't quite sure if they buy that we're all a bunch of heinous Elmer Fuds running around with our shotguns. It's designed to bring them out there, have great food, great events, let people do helicopter rides, four-wheel drive, learn how to shoot firearms, and just have fellowship with other gun owners throughout the state. And so that'll be happening on April 13th. And then something that it's very positive that's happening throughout the state is about 2 years ago, the CRPA started to invest a considerable amount of money into helping faith-based properties, because a lot of people don't realize that every few minutes throughout the United States, a faith-based property comes under some kind of violent attack or sexual predation or embezzlement. And so because this isn't talked about, it's not covered in the news, a lot of these faith-based properties do not know what to do to prepare for it, and how to respond when the bad thing does happen, and how to respond in the long term. And so we have put considerable funding together. We have 2 more of these events this year. One of them is way up in Northern California that happens on May 20th in Ukiah for the North Bay area. But then we have another one that will be coming down here September 9th, which will be down in Marietta Hot Springs over here, which is just slightly north of you guys. And those are designed for people of faith to be able to come out and find out what are the real threats, where do they really happen, what are the mistakes that people make that allow these things to happen. And the special guest at there will be the pastor from the Sutherland Springs, Texas incident that will not only talk about what happened that day, but what it took to bring his congregation back together in the year that followed.
You know, it's interesting talking about the bad things that happen, because I do get the question periodically from people whether you can own body armor in the state of California. And it just so happens I'm sitting on a Cover Me seat, because there's a company that makes something called a Cover Me seat. It's like a little stadium chair, and it's got Kevlar on both sides. And it only has a plate on one side, because that's the back. What they discovered is if you're sitting on the plate, the plate's making contact with whatever you're sitting on for any long period of time, it degrades the plate. So they didn't want to promise that it would work and have it not work. So you have a plate on one side for rifles, but it will stop handguns. I'm actually reviewing it, so I'm sitting on it now to see if it's comfortable, and it is. And we're going to review it. We're going to have the guy that makes the Cover Me seat on the show. And so, yes, you can buy body armor if you want to do that, and you look a little silly walking around in it all the time. But there are products like this one that make it pretty easy to use. Now, we do have a couple of more comments here, Rick. I'm sorry. Let me get back one of these. This one asks, are you suing? Where'd it go? I lost it. Let's see. Hang on a second. I was asking about a lawsuit. Okay. Question. Are you suing California for the ban by attrition on handguns with the microstamping requirement?
We are suing on the microstamping issue, but not on an attrition thing.
Well, I think the ban by attrition, what they're referring to is that microstamping along with the handgun roster and other things essentially is banning handguns by attrition. So I get that. And are you suing also on the roster, or is it the same suit?
Yes, there's 2 separate suits.
Where are they in the process? How much can you tell us about that?
They're currently in the queue for the Supreme Court. People weren't pushing, obviously, until we had these major changes. Right now, the Supreme Court is looking at a case from New York. And what we're looking for is what will become a standard review. After Heller and McDonald, which were fairly clear of what had to happen, we saw that the lower circuit courts, such as our infamous Ninth Circuit, have done their utmost to try to water down those standards of review of what is and isn't constitutional under the Second Amendment. So right now, everybody is geared up for a case that comes out of New York City that is going to the Supreme Court, is supposed to be heard in this session to see how the new Supreme Court with our new justices are going to set that bar for the standard of review. Once that bar is set, you're going to see a flurry of lawsuits come out that are designed to go up there and broaden all of our rights under the Second Amendment.
So what exactly, Rick, what exactly are the standards of review as you've explained? If you wouldn't mind explaining that. And where is it going wrong currently, and what are you hoping the change is going to be?
So I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to go deep into standards of review because I would probably screw it up, and I don't want to do that. So
that's why I asked you and didn't try it myself, so I get it.
But basically what a standard of review does in the case of the Second Amendment, it says, what are we allowed to do? And one of the questions that was asked in Heller and McDonald was, did your rights of self-protection in the Second Amendment end at your nightstand? In other words, okay, you can have a firearm on your nightstand, but you can't go in the hallway. Or can you go in the hallway and out to the front door? Or can you go out the front door? Or does that right actually carry with you as you travel about, which would be the case for open carry and concealed carry? And where a lot of this comes down to is when you have conflicts, such as we do in the Ninth Circuit, where you have one state saying you have the right to concealed carry, but not open carry. And then you have another state that says, no, it's flip-flop. Well, which is it in the Ninth Circuit? You can't have conflicting views. So that's one of the cases that's also going up, like Young v. Hawaii and others. They're up in front of the Supreme Court. And then when the court says, no, you can't do that, that's restricting the Second Amendment, then both of those become law of the land. And so that's why there was such a huge battle for this last election for president, because everybody knew that if Hillary Clinton had won that election, the 2 new Supreme Court justices would have been to the left of center. and would have been anti-2A. But as a result, we got two justices who are going to affirm the things that we saw Justice Scalia do in both Heller and McDonald.
Now, some of the things the courts have been doing is looking at it from different points of view. Like some of them, they'll look at it in kind of a fuzzy fashion. Well, the government has a concern here, and so the government has a concern here, we'll allow it. Where other courts look at it more strictly and say, no, this is a constitutional right, and the fact that the government has some fuzzy concern does not give them the authority under constitutional right to abridge or in any way infringe upon that right.
Right.
And that's part of what that judicial review process is. The Supreme Court needs to instruct the lower courts so that they look at it with the same barometer, the same yardstick. If you're looking at this is a constitutional right, and when you're reviewing a constitutional right, the Second Amendment or any other constitutional right, you have to use this level of measurement before you allow it to be abridged or you allow it to be infringed upon in any way. And we're not, that level, that rule has not been set. So it strikes me that what we're hoping, and correct me if I'm wrong, what we're hoping the Supreme Court will do is actually set out those rules so that lower courts have to look at it and measure it, and they're all using the same yardstick. They're all playing the same sheet of music. Is that what we're looking for?
That's exactly what we're looking for.
And hoping
that's
for.
Why, when we talked earlier, we owe a lot to the National Rifle Association for helping to get Donald Trump in there, which gave us our two newest justices.
Now, with all that in mind, let me ask you if there are, first of all, I think there are some questions I want to get to here, but before we do, is there anything else that I didn't ask you or that you feel it's important to cover right now that we haven't talked about?
No, I don't want to go down too many other roads today. We'll come back and do a different show on some other topics.
No rat holes today. Okay, yeah. I get it. We're not going down rat holes today. That's fine. All right, so stick with me for just a second, Rick. Let me see if I can skim through the rest of these real quick and see. Here's one question. There is CRPA, GOC, Cal Guns Foundation, and FPC, which is the Firearms Policy Coalition. What other gun rights organizations are there in California?
There's a lot of them from the local level that fight all the way up the food chain. So, in California, what I tell people to do with any organization is you need to go look what they're doing. You need to look at, do their values reflect the values that you have? And are there ways for you to get involved? Because just giving money is not part of it. Part of it is we need people to get involved. We need people throughout the Second Amendment community talking to their neighbors and moving out there. So I'm not going to, I'm not the guy that's going to get out here and say, we need to do this, we need to do that. But this is an issue that we got to make sure that people realize everyone needs support, but you got to look at the efficacy of the organization and you got to look at, is that where you want to put your money?
All right, one more question. When did the states get authority to amend the Constitution? To my understanding, the only people that can amend the Constitution was Congress. How can states pass laws that violate the Second Amendment? That's a bunch of different questions. I guess the first one is, do states actually have the ability to amend the United States Constitution?
No, they don't. And I'm not trying to be simplistic with this, but you got to realize, a lot of us grew up in houses. I know you and I have talked about, we had similar backgrounds growing up. There were certain things that you were not allowed to say in your house growing up, certain language choices, for example. Now, did it mean you couldn't do it? No, it meant there were consequences. And what has happened is there have been no consequences. I mean, if you look just back to a couple of things affecting directly the Second Amendment, when we had the famous Peruta case down there, we had the Ninth Circuit, a 3-judge panel vote, 2-1, that, the NRA and the CRPA were right, Mr. Peruta was right, and that people had a right. And then we had, at that time, an Attorney General, Harris, who's now our senator, who said, oh, yeah, I didn't get involved, but I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to do an en banc review, and I'm going to, cherry pick who I want on that to overturn it. The issue that we had is we didn't have a Supreme Court at that point that was willing to say attorney generals can't do that. That's against the law. And that, again, goes back to why I said it's so important that we got the Supreme Court we have. We have a Supreme Court that if you look on cases already that they've started to decide, they're setting standards and saying what's been going on is unacceptable and is not legal.
Well, okay. So, Rick, I'm gonna look here and just scan and see if there's one or two more. I don't think there are. Let's look here real quick. I think I got them all. If I looked and I did not see your question, forgive me. There's a bunch of comments here, and I'm one guy, so I don't have a producer to sit here and do this, and I'm one guy operating the thing. So if I didn't see your question, I apologize. I don't see any more, to be honest with you, but certainly this is not the first time Rick has come on the show. Certainly won't be the last. Yep. So if you have additional questions and you want to direct them to Rick, can they contact your office or send you an email or something?
Contact the office, send us questions, and only thing I ask is give us more than a day to get it back. It takes longer than a day, but we're really busy fighting these bills and with the litigation. So sometimes we don't get back in the same day. It's not that we don't care. We do care. We care very much about our members and our 2A community, but just give us a little time to get back to you.
Well, and just to illustrate that, I mean, so that you know, one of the reasons I can't schedule these live streams for you so that you know they're coming is because with Rick's schedule and my schedule, and even when I'm working with Sam, these folks are working their tails off fighting these things all day long, every day. So trying to squeak out an hour to do this is tough. I mean, it really is tough. And so Rick and I went back and forth. Well, we go back and forth for like 3 days until we finally locked down this time. And I have the feeling the minute he's done with this, his executive assistant's going to grab him and drag him off to something.
She's already been in here twice.
I'm not surprised. Okay, so I need to get you out of here. But thank you very much. If you're still with us, thank you very much for watching as long as you have. I'm really, really grateful. Yeah. Don't forget to support all. I'm just going to urge you to support at least the Second Amendment organizations are doing things. Now, I got to be honest with you. There's a lot. I don't know them all. And so, as Rick said, there may be local ones. I know there's one here in San Diego called San Diego Gun Owners. I know nothing about them, really. So I can't speak intelligently about it, but I think if you check them out, you might, from my understanding is they do some great stuff. But again, I don't know. So, but I suspect that in local areas like LA or whatever, there may be other ones. Check them out and see if they fit the bill for you. And if you want to help. But the biggest thing, truthfully, and Rick said it earlier, is personal involvement. It's great to be able to send money, and if you want to send money, nobody's ever going to turn it down. You send me money, I'm going to smile and say, oh, wonderful, we can buy another microphone, or we can do this, or we can pay to go on a hunting trip to shoot hunting video for you. By the way, I have one of those coming up. Or we can do things like that. Or we can just have better equipment or whatever. But honestly, the personal involvement with these organizations is key. The more you're involved, the less money it takes, quite frankly. So get involved if you're not right now. We need folks we need our little, for lack of a better word, our little rather large army of California gun owners to wake up and get involved with these organizations and help. And if we do, we can start getting some wins instead of having to talk about all this discouraging stuff. Well, thank you very much, Rick. I really appreciate your time, my friend. I'm very grateful that you came on the show, and I know you've got to run, so I won't keep any longer, but I thank you very much for being there, and I look forward to talking to you the next time.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right,
keep up the good work.
All righty, I'll do my best. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate everything you do to help out with GunGuyTV and help out with the Second Amendment. Have a wonderful week, and wherever you go, whatever you do, please be safe.